There's not a whole lot of moments when working in a recording studio where something comes out that changes the way I think about mixing and how I could approach music production, and that gets me genuinely excited for the future, and that may trigger the end of hardware as we know it. I've done a few videos with STL Tones. When they first reached out to me to try the plugin out, I absolutely loved it. I've used it ever since. I use it quite a bit. And one of the things that was fascinating with me, that even if I'm not using other people's presets, because the whole idea behind Control Hub and STL Tones is that you can get a look at what another producer would do with a certain source. And they have a lot of big names in there. Will Putney, Jeff Giuliano, like a lot of stuff that is really interesting to look and see or hear what they might do to a source, and how they've been doing that has been protected. And in the first initial conversations, I was like, how does this work? And they didn't tell me. Now we actually have access to that same technology that they've been doing, and it's shockingly easy to do. I've been playing with it for a couple weeks now. What they've branded it as tracer technology. I come from guitar, and Kemper resonates with me, so I think about it as profiling. I don't know if that's a trademark thing, so they're calling it tracing, but I may use profiling just because that's the word I remember and the word that I know, so I apologize. But why is this cool? So I have these racks of gear here, and if I want to work, I'm kind of tied to this rack, especially for my mastering chain, or if I want to use something. And I love my outboard gear because they do certain things in certain instances that are really, really hard to replicate in the box. But even aside from that argument, you're still only allowed to use one at a time. I can only use it on one source at a time. Well, what if I could duplicate that? I'll give you a for instance, my overheads here. So I have my UBK Fatso, which is basically like an Empirical Labs Fatso that was modded by Kush Audio. I love to use that thing on drums and just squash it. But I also love to use it on bass and guitars and synths and vocals. But I can only use it on one at a time. So here's what I'm doing. Here's our drums. Now, this is part of a session where everything was recorded with ribbon mics, and there's a whole other video of that coming. And if you're interested in these tracks for these songs, these will be available for the patrons. Follow the link down in the description below for that. But that's not what this video is about. On the overheads, I have my Fatso. Then without it, listen to the snare. You can hear the difference in the snare. It just kind of inflates things. It's definitely more like there's a lot of Transformer mojo in this thing, and I would love to have it on as many items as possible, but I can't. So what do I do? Here's what we're gonna do. So I pull up STL Tones Control Hub. I'm greeted by what we know and love as familiar. But what's interesting is if we come over here to Tracer, now we can model our own gear. Complete signal change, which I've done with my mastering chain, and it is over here, Recording Studio Loser Master Chain, and it sounds like my mastering chain. Will it sound good for you? Who knows? We're gonna trace this compressor right now. It's not gonna get the compression artifacts, but all of this stuff built in here, it'll get pretty darn close. So, compressor. Setup. Locate the tracer audio file by clicking the locate button. So, they make it super easy. So, locate, pulls up the tracer tone. I already have a couple tracks up here where I'm just going to literally drag this tracer file up on this track. Awesome, and you can see where I've done this a couple times. So we're gonna go over here. I have this bus set to go out to my tracer print, which will make a whole lot more sense here in a second. So on this file, all I have is the tracer tone that it told me to pull in, and that sounds like complete crud. Let's go ahead and bus it to the listen track here so that we can hear it. You're not going to want to hear it for long. Ominous, right? Yeah. So what we're going to do is pull the fatso up to that track. So what it's going to do is route all of this through the fatso, and then I'm just going to record it. So I know from experience that these are coming in a little hot, so I'm going to pull it down about 10 dB here, and we'll see. The other thing you want to do is keep it around 3 dB of compression, so I'm going to pull back a little more. That's hitting around 5. And I'll go over here where it gets really loud. That's pretty darn close right there. So I'm just going to set this to record, and we'll be back in a couple minutes. Super weird. I don't really want to listen to it. Oh, you know, one thing, I'm going to stop and do this. I'm going to put a signal generator right before the fatso here. Turn this on. And what I'm going to attempt to do is make sure that my left and right are pretty darn close. So on this box, I have a signal generator coming out. So the way I set the input is when I can get a light to just change. Right there. So now all I have to do is adjust the outputs. Ooh, that is pretty spot on. And then I'm going to double check. I'm going to pull this down. Right about there is perfect. All right, let's print it. So what's happening here, and I don't keep my compressors linked stereo typically because I like the weird artifacty stuff that happens in the left and the right because they're not the same. Using the signal generator on something like this, because they're two independent channels, I can't really trust the numbers on my knobs. You never should really trust the numbers on your outboard knobs anyway. That's why signal generators are a huge help in the studio, that you can get your left and your right dialed in the way they need to be. And what this is doing now, it's basically taking a snapshot of the harmonic structure of the box. It's not really going to capture the compression exactly the way that we're used to, but that's okay. Normally when I'm reaching for a compressor, it's not because I like the way it compresses, maybe to an extent, but more so I'm reaching for a certain compressor because of the color of that box, the way it breaks up, the harmonic complexity within that box. And this is going to sample pretty much all of that. And because I can take it as a stereo, I can use these on stereo sources, I can use it on mono sources, I can do whatever I want with it, and I have the picture of this thing in as many places as I want it to be, which is super exciting. Okay, looks like we are finished. So what I need to do is export this tracer print. I'm gonna export it as a file, 2448. I'm just gonna put it in my audio files folder. Go back to STL. I'm going to import what we just printed, and it was important that I exported it as a stereo left-right. It's going to analyze it, and it's going to tell me if there's an issue, if it's too loud, if it's too quiet, and then I can make an adjustment if I need to. Hey, we're good. And now, because it's good, it's saying, hey, this is a good trace. Now you can trace it mono or trace it stereo. I want to trace it stereo. Yes. It's doing its thing. Tracking complete. Refine by tweaking the parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this overhead track. I want to duplicate everything on it. I'm going to get rid of the second instance of STL Tones, and I'm going to bring the fatso down to that. So now, when we go back to the beginning of this song and listen to the overheads, I can just solo the STL version or the fatso version and then dial it in. So I definitely need some more gain. That's pretty darn close. So now I just save it. I could save this as my Fatso. And this is on the glue setting, by the way. One of my favorite settings on this box. With the Trefo engaged. Compression. Fatso. Notes. No warmth. Trefo engaged. Save. Tell me that's not stupid close. So here's the other cool thing. The other part that they're doing is there's a tone exchange. So what I can do is upload this to the tone exchange. It's now uploading that. Trace uploaded successfully. What the heck does that mean? So if we go over here to the tone exchange, I wonder if we can sort this by newest. Jeremy Mang, Fatso Glue Trefo. Now, if you have STL Tones and you've updated to the latest version of this plugin, you can go get this right now. You can have my Fatso, which is kind of wild to think about. I've done the same thing with my vac rack, my inward connections vac rack over here. I have searched for another one of these units. I didn't realize the company was defunct at this point, and the used versions of this cost so much. I did not pay this much, but now they're going for like $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. I'm sure that's seasonal and it's going to go up and down. I didn't pay nearly that for that box, but I love that box, and I wish I had one more of it, and I can get that with this. Is it exact? It's not exact. I'm not coming back in and hitting my converters like I would in an outboard situation, but if I'm just going for that tonal color that I would reach for a compressor for, and I'm not trying to do something crazy specific with it, this does the thing. And I've already done it with the vac rack because I love it on bass. So what did I do? I put it on my bass. Here's my vac rack. It's just insanely fat, and I love it on vocals as well.
All is getting cozy. Come on down.
What the vac rack does to the low mids as well as the air is hard to beat, and it's hard to make that decision of what you want it on. Now I can get that low mid thing and that high thing, and so can you, because it'll be in tone exchange in the STL Tones Hub. I have done this with my mastering chain, and I need to tweak it a bit more, but what I can tell you so far is going through an entire chain of software and hardware. I've gone through my Audioscapes G Stereo, my Neve Portico 2 Master Bus Processor, which is on everything that I do. The trace on it was really close. There's some stereo field stuff that it's not getting exactly spot on, but frankly with stuff in the box, it's easy to supplement that but still get the vibe that I want to get here. So if I need to do something on the road, in a bus, on location, I can, and I can take it with me. It's pretty cool. Now this is right along with my normal thing as far as profiles go. I've said this with the Kemper as well. I love the Kemper. I have the Kemper. I take it out and I use it all the time. Is it an amp? It's not an amp. Having these traces of different compressors and chains, you're not gonna have the exact thing. I don't really think it matters in a certain context. The reason I'm taking a Kemper is because it's consistent, it's repeatable, it's always going to work. The same may not be with a tube amp, but on the flip side of it, the thing that I don't get with my Kemper is I don't necessarily get the same kind of inspiration as I would with an amp. I don't have that exact same like push-pull relationship with my Kemper. I think I feel the same thing here, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. I still use my Kemper all the time. I still use my amps all the time. I think if you're somebody looking into outboard gear and you're trying to see what those flavors are, this is such an easy way in, where even I'm looking at some of these traces where people have other pieces of hardware that I don't have, and I can see the vibe of that piece. I'm not going to see exactly how it compresses something, but that's, again, not why I reach for a compressor. That's not why I reach for a certain box. It's the vibe, it's the color, it's the shaping that it does, and that you can hear it here. This video was sponsored by STL Tones. They did send this to me. I've had a long relationship with STL Tones, but I think what they're doing in the space like this is genuinely cool. And stuff like this is genuinely needed. And I think stuff like this kind of starts to break down barriers of gear and like gear acquisition syndrome. If you're trying to scratch that outboard itch in a certain way, or you're shopping around, this is a very minimal risk way to do it. Some of my traces will be on Tone Exchange. There's already a lot on Tone Exchange at the time of filming this, and this is before release day, so I can't imagine what it's going to ramp up to. I'm super excited for this, and if you guys want to check it out, I will put links down in the description below. Go find some of my traces on there. They're going to be listed as Jeremy Meng or Recording Studio Loser. Look for both. Let me know if you guys use them. Let me know if you download them. Let me know how you like them. I'm Resident Loser Jeremy, and I'll see you in the next one.